In Parsha A, the Torah repeats the laws of kashrus, about which animals we're allowed to eat and we're not allowed to eat. And the known two symbols of a kosher animal are that it has to have split hooves, it has to have a hoof right under the foot, which is completely split, as well as chewing its cud, which means that it regurgitates the food in its stomach and brings it back up in some way that I don't fully understand myself. Now, the Rebbe explains that the reason why these are the kosher symbols must mean that they have some symbolism into living a kosher lifestyle. In other words, if this is the food that we're allowed to eat because this food chews its cud and has split feet, then that must mean that the concept of chewing cud and having split feet is a sign that something is eligible to be elevated towards God. The food we eat becomes consumed in our bodies, replenishes our soul, connects our soul to our bodies to allow us to serve Hashem. And the food that allows us to do that is this food that has these symptoms of the split hooves and chewing its cud. So that means that these symptoms make it eligible to enter the realm of holiness. So in our life, what does that translate to? How do we become kosher meat? And how do we develop these symptoms of kashrus for us to become consumed, so to say, by Hashem? And the explanation goes as follows. A split hoof represents that we could have split personalities, but not in the negative disorder. Split personalities means that we're not stuck in our own nature. Whatever our nature is, no matter how good and how holy it looks like, if we're only stuck in doing things that we're used to, then we're probably not serving God in the purest sense. We are serving ourselves. This is our routine, this is our habit. And someone could be living a completely religious lifestyle, but if all they do is do whatever's comfortable for them and whatever they're used to, and they never challenge themselves to do the opposite. In other words, if someone's always really kind and really giving, but they don't know how to put a foot down and to tell themselves no, and to be mahadir in something, or to take on to refrain from something that they're not used to, then are they really serving Hashem, or are they just serving just living their own personality that they're used to, and it happens to Lakoli, it's not a bad thing, but not necessarily is it godly and consumed as kosher by God. So a split hoof represents someone that's able to split himself, so to say, transcend himself, step out of his personality, and be able to connect to Hashem in a way that's uncomfortable for him. The Rebbe brings that this is why Avram Avinu, specifically the 10th of his challenges, which was sacrificing his son, it says, Ata yadaiti kirei li kimata, that now I know that you're someone that fears God. Why only now? Avram was living from 75 years old, or even earlier, with complete mesiras nefesh. He gave himself, he sacrificed his life when he destroyed his father's idols. And there was 9 other big challenges that Avram proved his faith in Hashem. Why does this one prove, specifically the 10th one of sacrificing his son, that he's a fearer of God? And the explanation is because Avram was a man of chesed, a man of kindness. Over here, Hashem didn't just ask him to sacrifice within the realm of kindness. Hashem asked him to sacrifice within the realm of severity to slaughter his son. This is completely against the personality of Avram. It wasn't even a sacrifice within his personality. It was something completely opposite from what he's used to. And if he's able to split himself that way, then that shows really kirei le kimata. That's the sign of splitting the hooves. Then there's the sign of chewing our cud, which is even, let's say we get used to this. Or we could tell ourselves and sometimes convince ourselves whatever we want, that we split our hooves also. And we have to be careful to always chew our cud and to always make a cheshbon nefesh. Am I really still doing things altruistically? Am I really doing this for God-centered reasons, or am I doing this for self-centered reasons? Have I really challenged myself and done something purely for the sake of Hashem, or has my challenging myself itself become part of my nature? And these are things, if we're really on a journey to connect to Hashem, who is infinite, then we can never master it, and we can never say we got it. And we always need to constantly go through the chewing the cud process to check ourselves, to check our motives when we're doing something. Are we doing this for ourselves, or are we doing this for the sake of Hashem? And to challenge our own natures, what am I doing really for the sake of God, and what am I doing, even in my transcendence, I'm just used to this type of transcendence. Well, that's called the malagera, the chewing of the cud. There's some other thoughts connected to this, which is the Torah mentions 4 animals that have one of the signs. 3 of them chew their cud but don't have split hooves. And one of them, namely the pig, which has split hooves but it doesn't chew its cud. Yet the way the Torah says that these aren't kosher, this is the way the Torah says it, both in Parsha Shmini and in Parsha A. It says these 4 animals you shouldn't eat, they're tameh for you, because they have the kosher symbol and they also have the not kosher symbol. Now, seemingly that doesn't make any sense. Why are these animals not kosher? Because they have the kosher symbol and also the not kosher symbol? Or they're not kosher even though they have the kosher symbol, but they also have the not kosher symbol? It seems like from the way the Torah says it, that the kosher symbol is part of what makes them not kosher. Again, the way the Torah says it is these four animals are not kosher because they have the kosher symbol and they also have a non-kosher symbol. In other words, the kosher symbol is part of the because of why you can't eat it. So the Kli Yakar has a fascinating explanation, which is part of what makes these animals not kosher is that they flaunt a kosher symbol. They are showing how good and righteous and self-righteous they are on the outside and not willing to show their true colors of their negativities, not willing to be vulnerable and show their lack and their chesroinus, and they're just showing, look, I have a kosher symbol. Now, if something's essentially kosher and that and you see that on them, then great. But if someone's consciously looking just to try to show a macho self-image, a self-righteous self-image, well, then that cover-up itself is part of the problem. And that's the problem of these four animals, not only that they're not kosher, but also that they flaunt a kosher symbol. This is also why the pig specifically is known as the symbol of non-kosher food. Because the other three, they don't chew their cud, which is an internal non-kosher sign. So you don't see it as much flaunted outside. The pig has a split hooves. When you look at it, it looks completely kosher. Its problem is on the inside, but on the outside it looks so good. What's the lesson in this? So obviously that we should live with integrity and with authenticity and not try to give off fake righteousness and as if everything's all good, but to be able to be true to ourselves and to others where we're strong and where we're weak. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and we should be honest with ourselves and honest with others. However, it goes one step deeper, because the Medrash says that the chazer, the pig, represents the galus that we're in now. The galus Edom, which is usually translated as the galus of the West, Western civilization. How true is that these days? When you look at Western civilization versus the other galuyos, in the previous exiles, we knew we were in exile because we were dealing with wicked countries that were slaughtering Jews, crusaders, going back even to enslavement, going back to Galus Bavel, to the Romans. Oh, that was early Galus Edom. But nowadays, what's the Galus of Western civilization? A Galus that looks so good on the outside. It looks so compelling, so mighty, so wealthy, so affluent, and so moral. Yet we see now in the name of the morality that the morality is just the hoofs from the outside, but inside there's real rot. And we see now, right before Mashiach comes, when Avodas HaBirurim is being finished, that we are separating the good and evil, and we're able to really see clearly that there's a lot of good on the outside, but oftentimes that is just moral justification for very rotten values. Look at all the, we don't need to elaborate on all the countries that are siding with terrorists, and rewarding terrorists in the name of justice and compassion for the victim. And it sounds so good and just and moral, yet it's so twisted and anti-Semitic. So this is the lesson from this week's Parsha. And great context for us to realize the time we're living in now. We are watching Golus unravel. I'll give one more thought I heard once from the Alter Rebbe. I don't remember exactly where this is written, but it's a fascinating explanation that when we are about to enter this last Golus, the ministering angel of our Golus, of our exile, spoke to the ministering angel of the previous Golus and said, "You guys were fools. You guys went against it." He spoke to Egypt, to Babylon, Persia, said, "You guys were fools. You went against the Jews with gvura, with might. You went against them. You went to squash them, and you very clearly and blatantly told them, we don't like you, and we're going to subjugate you." So the Jews have Mesiras Nefesh, and eventually God made sure that those exiles didn't last so long. The Galus of what the West said, the ministering angel of the Galus of the West said, "I'm going to come at them differently. I'm going to come at them with kindness. My exile is going to be cloaked in kindness, and watch how long I last. They're not going to look at me as exile. They're going to see me as a friend. Look, I'm kosher. I have a split hoof." When in the inside, it's really galus. And I think now around the world, the Jews are realizing this, that even though we lived in the West and it's so embracive towards the Jews and seems so comfortable, yet that is at the surface. Internally, a Jew is never fully comfortable in galus. Our place is with Mashiach. Our place is in Eretz Yisrael, with Shleimus Haaretz and under the domain of Melech HaMashiach. And anytime we're living in exile, even if it looks so good at the surface, at some point we get clarity. And the clarity is that the goodness is only at the surface and face value, but inside this is not our place. And maybe that's a scary realization, but also maybe it's a good realization and a sobering realization for us to resort back to real reality. Now at least we know what we're dealing with, and we can remind ourselves who we really are. And when we know who we are, and we know we're not in our usual place, we know we're not where we're supposed to be, even if it seems that way for a second, then we know what we could work towards, and we could get out of Golos quicker and herald the time of Melech HaMashiach immediately. Have a great Shabbos.